whenever I do my seasonal upgrade of my wardrobe, somehow my underwear drawer fails every time. Like mystery pairs from a few years ago in fabric that gave up somewhere around 2020. Why do we hold on to these things? So I finally did something about it thanks to our sponsor, MeUndies. Honestly, my old underwear is now unemployed. The second you feel the fabric, you get it. It's that buttery soft, breathable, lightweight ultramodal that works, especially when it's hot and you're wearing as little as possible. No digging, no bunching, no riding up, just all-day comfort. And the prints, so fun. My drawer went from chaotic grab bag to, ooh, what am I wearing today? And they've got styles for everyone. Classic basics to bold seasonal prints. Sizes extra small to 4XL, all designed to actually fit real bodies. Plus, they used responsibly sourced materials, and if your first pair isn't love at first wear, their problem-free philosophy has you covered. Over 30 million pairs sold and 90,000 five-star reviews. So yeah, it's not just me. I'm loving this beautiful red matching bralette and high-waisted undie set that I got, and I've been actually giving the same thing to my girlfriends for their birthdays. Big hit. I also swapped out some of Nippy's outdated boxers because, yeah, he needed an upgrade too. Everybody's grateful all around. And people, it's just time to let your old underwear go sometimes, respectfully. Right now, as a listener of our show, you can get up to 50% off your first order plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/culty. Promo code culty. That's up to 50% off plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/culty. Promo code culty.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty.
Welcome back to part 2 with our conversation with Harrison Hill about his book, The Oracle's Daughter, The Rise and Fall of an American Cult. If you haven't listened to the first episode, this one will not make sense to you.
It's a great book, and we're really enjoying it. In part 1, we talked about the group.
The Aggressive Christianity Missions Training Corps.
When we Googled it, there's not a lot of...
Some uniforms.
There's some uniforms, but there's not a lot of pictures. Am I right? Or I guess you probably have access to some.
I mean, I do have access to some, but again, part of what was intriguing to me about this group and part of what made me think that it could be like a great book is that there's been very little coverage of it. I mean, the book began as an article I wrote for The Cut, and that's pretty much the most substantial coverage that it's received. Of course, there's like some local like press coverage of, crimes and such. But other than that, no, this is kind of it. So that's a little bit fun, is that you feel like you're kind of like breaking news in some way.
Oh, yeah. Also, to do the investigative journalist angle is different than a memoir. Like I don't know if you read Sarah Berman's book, Don't Call It a Cult. That was about our cult, which was very different.
I haven't read it, but I know of it. Yeah.
So you're like the Sarah Berman of the ACTCM, right? For us, in terms of like
it's MTC.
Whatever.
ACMTC.
ACMTC.
Yes, that's it.
I'm a little bit dyslexic, so I reverse things. That's my excuse. ACMTC. All right, so you've set up this extreme group. I think our audience will, especially those who are history buffs and also want to know the nitty-gritty, you really paint a picture of how not only physically difficult it got, but emotionally difficult, with people being shunned, dangled their salvation, and having to live in horrid situations, very descriptive, horrifying details about life in the compound. What's Sarah's journey, and how were things terrible for her, and how did she finally decide? What was her breaking point? How did she decide to leave? Deborah's daughter.
Yeah. So the book is called The Oracle's Daughter, and that person is Sarah Green. So Sarah Green was the oldest child of Jim and Deborah Green. She was born in the early 70s, and she knew a little bit of the regular world before her mother, Deborah, started believing she was a prophet. So that was, I think, sort of critical to her journey. She knew what it was like to go to school. She knew what it was like to have friends that she could run around with and go to the bodega and buy a soda and all that kind of stuff. She'd had a touch with reality. And so then when she was young and her mother started giving these prophecies and started wailing and started giving birth to spiritual children, that's another thing Deborah would do. These give birth to thousands of spiritual children who would float over the world. And it's kind of hard to understand, but that's that. Anyways, Deborah started to believe she was a prophet and started building this group. Gradually, the children in the group were removed from school and they had very little contact with the outside world, and then ultimately no contact with the outside world. This was very difficult for Sarah. She was a very outgoing child, she had a real zest for life. She loved being outdoors and going bike riding and loved just being with her friends and laughing. And, if you meet her, you get this real sense of her as someone who's just in it. She's just in life, being there, doing it. And so since she was in this group, she just wasn't able to do that in the same way. And so it was a real grief in her life. And so at one point, she actually tried to run away and ran away for one night, but then was brought back to the group. And at that point, she became just totally despairing and was like, I'm never going to get out of this thing. But the years go by. She has, I won't say what happens, but the years go by and this slow building unhappiness with the group becomes just impossible to ignore. It's just sort of this sea, this tsunami inside of her. And she's just like, I have to get out of here. And, she had 3 children in the group, one biological child and one not biological child in the group. And that was always the impossible thing for her. It was like, okay, if I'm leaving this group, do I have to leave these children? And she ultimately determined that she did. That was the decision that she made for herself. Whether she really did or not, that's sort of another question. But she ultimately decided that she could, and what her dream was to go to the West Coast, go to midwifery school, become a midwife, help women have children, help babies, all that kind of stuff. And then her goal was that she would go back to the compound, she would get her kids, take them back with her to Seattle and, build a new life up there. I'm not really giving too much away because this is what happens in literally the first 3 pages. The very beginning of the book is this incredibly dramatic moment, to me at least, where Sarah and another member of the group get up out of their sleeping bags and slowly crawl away from this compound that's deep in New Mexico, because by this point they'd fled to New Mexico, and just somewhat terrified, somewhat thrilled, all this, they managed to get off the compound and hitchhike their way west. But how was she able to do it? I think in some ways it's an unanswerable question. It's like, how are any of us able to do certain things? I think that some of it was just kind of characterological. It was just who she was. Her personality she really pushed back on things. She had that capacity. And because she hadn't, quote unquote, joined the group, she was in it because she'd been born into it. She didn't ever make a decision to get drawn into it. She had a kind of resistance to some of the more radical things that happened that other people did not have. And because she'd been in the real world for a little bit, she knew what she was missing. I think also she knew what it was to be a young woman in the regular world, by which I mean getting a job and dating and, falling in love and heartbreak and having kids that you didn't have to who you could name yourself, being with people who you liked and just making mistakes and going to parties and drinking and all that kind of stuff. Her desire for that was just incredibly strong in a way that it was not, frankly, for her younger brother. Her younger brother was much more his personality was such that he wasn't able to do what Sarah was able to do. But yeah, how was she able to do it? Those are some of the factors. But again, it's kind of unanswerable. It's also a question of circumstance. There was this other member who temporarily joined the group. And in him, Sarah saw a way out. She was like, even if she wasn't able to do it herself, she was like, okay, well, I can do it with this guy. And he was always going to be there for a very limited time. So he wasn't kind of fully enmeshed within the group in the way that a lot of other people were.
Do you think she'd ever talk to us?
I do. Yeah, I very much think she would.
Love to chat. I'd love to hear. Yeah. Love to hear her journey from her mouth. She's been through it.
Yeah, maybe we can set that up.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so she escapes. Where is this in relation to the court case? How much do we need to know to understand the end?
So basically what happened, I'll give a little more context. The group began in the early 1980s. Sarah escaped the cult in 1999. in the middle there, in 1989, there was a huge legal battle that involved the group. I'll leave it to readers to find out exactly what that was. But the group was just in a lot of trouble. And so they decided to run away. And they did. And they landed ultimately in rural New Mexico. And so what's partly mind-blowing to me about this story, and for my early readers, one of the first things they always say is like, I cannot believe how they were able to sort of slip through the fingers of justice over so many decades. And they were. And so they'd had all this legal trouble in California, and it had not gone well for them. They continued to have little flips of legal trouble in years that followed. Authorities were extremely reluctant to get involved because of fear around what had happened at Waco. It had really spooked law enforcement. They didn't want to cause another huge fire that led to the death of a lot of people and be, brought in front of Congress and berated and all that kind of stuff. People were really reluctant to do anything that might be seen like that.
Also, it's time, money, and resources too, and you have to prove,
exactly. Yeah,
you have to prove coercion. There's a lot of variables. Yeah,
exactly. Totally. And that was a real issue with this. It was like, how do you prove any of this stuff? In fact, there was a lot of proof but it was hard to access at the time. But in terms of the legal troubles, it all really exploded in 2017 when a huge raid was conducted and a trial subsequently was held. And the trial is the climax of the book. And it's a really remarkable moment where Sarah has to testify against her own mother. And I just think that's like a situation that any of us it would be extremely difficult. And to me, what's interesting about the story is like there are all these competing emotional vectors going on. Like on the one hand, Sarah was desperate to leave this group, desperate to have a new life, desperate to be who she was. At the same time, she'd grown up in the group. She had a kind of loyalty to it, if only by virtue of the fact that she, just by time, if you're in something for as long as she was in it, you just get used to certain things. And she also, these were her parents. To go against them was to kind of fight this like basic biological instinct. And so at this moment in the trial, when we see Sarah coming up against Deborah, and again, I won't tell you what happens there, but it's pretty remarkable. She's fighting these two things at the same time. It's this impossible conflict. It's an irresolvable conflict because on the one hand, she knew that her parents had done a lot of really bad things and she wanted them to get justice. And at the same time, she was their daughter, and recognizing that you become the child again. She had to be the adult and the child at the same time and sort of say to the child inside of her, like, no, the objective adult has to kind of take over here. And yet that child's in there all the same. And to say that the parent needs to be locked up is it's really traumatic. And I think it's something that was very difficult for her and remains difficult for her.
You have their lives in your hand. You have their fate.
Totally.
And they both go to jail.
Your journey. How did you start this? And were you even aware that you may have had an area of susceptibility to coercion or anything? Or was that even on your radar? And then at the end of it, how have you come and how have you educated yourself on how people are susceptible and maybe even recognize an area in your life where you might be susceptible and what's your sensitivity to it and how's that morphed over the course of, 5 years?
Yeah. How many years was it? So many. This is such a great question and one that I've thought a lot about because what I'll say is the thing that really struck me was that this group, it was such a product of its time. There were all these kind of historical contingencies that were stacked up on it themselves that led to the group being what it was. I think that the group itself would have said, no, we are God's army. We are what we are because we were chosen. And to my reading of it, it's just not true. They were hippies because the counterculture was going on. They became really fundamentalist in the 80s, in part because that was in the air. That was what was happening with far-right Christianity. They became hardcore right-wing and ultimately, and that was sort of a product of the time as well. And so I think that what that made me feel was that and I kind of knew this intellectually going into it, but it's another thing to really feel it, which is that we are so much more products of our time than we might like to think. The way that we make decisions it's so shaped by culture. And again, you think you're operating in this kind of neutral vacuum. It's like, okay, well, history is history. That was the 60s. They were doing that thing then. 80s were that thing. They were doing that thing then. Even the 90s. Okay, yeah. Well, that TV show, blah, blah, blah. But we are in one of those moments too. And it'll be 50 years from now. We'll say, okay, well, that was the 2020s. That's what they were doing then. And it's not a neutral. It's that there's a whole swarm of factors that shape how we behave, some of which we know, some of which we don't know. And so that has made me a little bit like, I don't know, maybe shudder is too strong of a word, but it gives me a little chill where I'm like, well, what am I doing? What are we doing that is a product of our time that's really not good? Even you look back even like 10, 15 years, and there's certain things that just society is like, well, that's bad. And society generally didn't either maybe even know, because there were like scientific discoveries that hadn't been made, and then like the society changes. So I think that was a real thing that I felt that was something I did not expect. Another thing that I didn't expect, this is the other thing I would say here, is that this was a little surprising to me too, but I think that it gave me a little bit more comfort with doubt as it relates to religion. I come from a religious background. I've had sort of mixed relationships with it. But now, I go to church, and it's an important part of my life. And I think that writing the book was a kind of permission structure for me to be like, doesn't make me feel great. I feel doubt about this, but I feel good about this. And just to be comfortable with those coexisting. I mean, there's something a little bit bizarre about having written about this like wild extremist religious group that might make one feel sort of more comfortable with more mainstream religion. But I mean, that in fact was my experience, and one that I find really, I don't know, it kind of makes me chuckle.
Now for something a little less culty, a quick sponsor message. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress can hit harder than we realize, and it's not just about the numbers. At the start of 2026, nearly 9 in 10 Americans said they're feeling some kind of financial stress. I get it. I've had those nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if we're saving enough or beating myself up for not having it more together. It's easy to equate money with self-worth, but the truth is, struggling doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Therapy might not tell you how to balance your budget, but it can absolutely help you manage the pressure, shame, or anxiety that money worries create. It's a space to unpack your relationship with money and rebuild it with compassion, not judgment. That's where BetterHelp comes in. They take the stress out of finding the right therapist by doing the matching for you. After a quick questionnaire, BetterHelp connects you with a licensed professional based on your goals. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch therapists anytime. With over 12 years of experience and an incredible matching success rate, finding support really can be that easy. Because financial stress is heavy, but you don't have to carry it alone. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/culty. That's betterhelp.com/culty.
I've been cleaning out my closet lately. And by cleaning out my closet lately, I've been asking myself, will I ever wear this again? And to me, that's personal growth. So now I'm focusing on quality over quantity. Pieces that are well made, versatile, and actually easy to throw on without a full outfit crisis. That's why I keep coming back to Quince. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are thoughtful, and the pricing doesn't make me spiral. They've got beautiful staples made from 100% European linen, organic cotton, and really soft denim, with styles starting at around $50. Their spring pieces are lightweight, breathable, and effortlessly put together. And it's not just clothing. Their accessories are great too. Their leather bags are made from 100% hand-woven Italian leather and generally look way more expensive than they are. Quince works directly with ethical factories and cuts out the middleman, so you're getting high-quality pieces without the brand markup, which means fewer regrets and way better outfits. Personally, I like the ultra-stretch 24/7 Smart Chinos Athletic Tapered. I got my coffee bean brown pants in blue, and I'm waiting for the khaki as we speak. I wore them in Europe, and the Europeans couldn't get their eyes off me. Right, Sarah? Right, Nippy? Refresh your spring wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/culty for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. Go to quince.com/culty for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culty.
Okay, people, if you know me by now, you know that I don't gatekeep. I share all the good news. And thanks to our sponsor, Wayfair, I'm going to tell you about something very exciting. It's called Wayday. It's basically the Super Bowl of home shopping, and it's happening April 25th to 27th. We're talking up to 80% off with free shipping on everything. Yes, everything. And if you're like me, you also have a list of everything you want to change in your home or fix. Maybe you've been side-eyeing your living room or thinking that your patio deserves a glow-up. This is the moment. Wayfair makes it ridiculously easy to find exactly what fits your style and budget. Furniture, decor, outdoor stuff, it's all on sale. I'm personally eyeing a little piece to go by the front door with a shelf for the shoes at the bottom. Why there's so many shoes in the house all the time. And drawers on the top for all the life stuff, keys, earbuds, lip gloss. Because it's time to get organized here at the Edmondson Ames household, and Wayfair is our personal one-stop shop to make that happen. We also love how easy it is to shop, the filters, the reviews, the photos. It's like having thousands of people help you avoid a bad decision. Plus, Wayfair Verified is basically your shortcut to the good stuff. They vet products with a full quality checklist so you know what you're getting, and we can always trust the quality. And if you're not exactly assembly inclined like Nivea and I, they've also got installation options too, which have honestly saved us from at least one marriage-ending furniture situation. Fast, free shipping, huge deals, no guesswork. Wayday is the sale to shop the best deals in-home. We're talking up to 80% off with fast and free shipping on everything. Head to wayfair.com April 25th through 27th to shop Wayday. That's WAYFAIR.com, Wayfair. Every style, every home. Happy shopping. Sponsor break's done. Back for more culty stories.
I guess once you see the extreme, the mainstream feels a little less.
Yeah.
I've landed there. Because
or does it feel more safe?
To me, like I had two grandmothers and they had two distinct relationships with religion. And one of them, I mean,
like born again.
Bless her heart. It was anytime she tried to put it in front of me, I was just totally resistant. And the other one lived a life and didn't try and force it. And she lived it. And it made me kind of go. And then as I've seen extremism, I've looked at religion. I don't really have a particular one in mind. Is like, okay, if you can go there to your point and be comfortable with doubts and take what's good, then maybe all these churches on the blocks isn't such a bad thing in the way that I thought it was. And at my worst, I was atheist and thought they were stupid and judged them. Right.
Yeah. That's such a good point, and I feel idiotic that I hadn't thought of that.
Well, I'm 6 years in a podcast, so don't beat yourself up.
Yeah, the other thing it makes me want to say is that like it was really deeply important to me that this book not be condescending to religion generally.
Totally.
Because I think to do this conflation of extremism and non-extremism is really a disservice to people who are not, abusing children in the desert. I think it's both factually incorrect, and I think it's just sort of not a nice thing to do. At the same time, it also is really hard to distinguish between a cult and a religion. The boundary is very muddy, and some people don't even use that word because they find it not useful. And that's also true too. I mean, what do they say? Cult plus time equals religion. I mean, in some senses, it's true. And some of the things that very mainstream religions do, and we don't really think about, are very kind of wild if you step back and think about it. Christianity, so the Eucharist is this ritual in which people...
That was one of my notes about how you pointed that out.
Yeah, eat the body of Christ, and drink the blood. And, some people might say, okay, well, you're talking about cannibalism. That's what some people might say.
And I wouldn't argue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't argue.
Well, it's sort of like different churches would say different things. Like I think some people would say like it's literally, and then some people would say it's more like metaphorical. We don't have to get into transubstantiation, but that's what's going on there.
Can I read something from your book that I marked?
Please do. Yes, quote myself back to me.
I love.
Oh, you're on.
I love this. Cult, a word heavy with fear and judgment, with mockery and bewilderment. A swift, curt monosyllable stuffed with so much baggage that many scholars refuse to use it altogether, preferring instead wan, impotent terms like emergent religion or new religious movement. But what these terms fail to imply, what the word cult so energetically suggests, is an air of mystery, zeal, or even madness. People who speak ill of cults like to think of themselves as immune to their loopy, menacing ways. But embedded in that gleaming slash of a word, it's such a good use of words. Cult is the faint suggestion, the fascinating possibility that under the right circumstances, any normal person's defenses might fall, that they too might join. Like that's just such a great description because it's a controversial word too. Like even in our cult space, like the people that you've interviewed, some people don't use it. Even in our 5 years, we've gone through in and out of different, like, I don't even want to use the word. Like, is this group healthy? Like, are they hurting you? Are they lying to you? Like, let's be specific. But then the word cult is helpful when you want to like get the point across pretty quick, but it's also really not helpful when you're just slashing someone else's belief system because they don't agree with you.
It's bound to trigger someone.
It's so many things at once. And I really love that description.
Thank you.
My British dad, well done. Well done. That's for you, Dad. A history question. So there's a part where you talk about the Satanic Panic.
Mhm.
And one thing I love about your book is you go in and out of the protagonist's story, their journey in and out. And meanwhile, you're going back and forth between what's happening in the world and the history. And remind me, I want to come back and talk to you about the Shakers as well. But first, Satanic Panic. Thank you. We've not covered it specifically. We've touched on it through other people's sort of journeys. But I'm going to say to you what I think happened briefly, and then we correct me, and then I have a question.
Sure.
That basically some stuff was said about Satan and child abuse that was discredited. And now people refer to this time as a time when Christians were, or fundamentalist Christians, I should say, were making stuff up to create fear. And that was then discredited as there was no proof to it. Is that accurate? Like as a summary?
My read of it is a little bit different, but I'm not a scholar of the Satanic Panic, but read of it is that, yes, in the 80s, there were these allegations of child abuse at some daycares that really freaked a lot of people out, understandably. And they led to this widespread panic, as it's called, where people worried that there were these satanic cults on the street corner of every city and that all these schools had been infiltrated and that there were these tunnels underground where these horrifying religious ceremonies were being held and babies were being thrown against the wall of freezers and there were horns. I mean, it was just wild stuff. And, you look back now and it's just how did people believe this? And yet they did. There were something I think there was a report. I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is correct. There was a report that investigated 12,000 of these allegations and not one of them was true. And there's a real tragedy in there for many reasons. Basically, what happened is that sort of people would take a thread of an allegation and people would then ask children questions about had they been abused. And the people who did this, I think the quote was they were, quote, singularly ill-equipped to do these interviews. And so what happened is that they would sort of coax stories out of these kids that were just entirely made up. And there's really sad articles about this kind of stuff where children who are now adults would say yeah, people would not leave me alone until I said something. And so I just eventually was okay, yes, I was people did drip blood on me at the altar of Satan or whatever. I mean, and they would say, they said, this is just totally untrue, but people would not leave them alone. I mean, that's obviously one of the more extreme examples. But to me, the tragedy is wow, you traumatized all these children and then these adults, it's just ruinous for people's lives to have these accusations trailing them. And so it's very sad to me.
We need to do an episode on it because the thing that stuck out to me, especially when you're saying we're in the time now, we don't know what we're doing now. We'll know in 15 years. What I do see right now, because we're in the midst of
some people know, right?
Well, yeah. But what I do feel right now is we're in the midst of all this Epstein horrendous shit coming out. And 7 to 10 years ago, people were saying there was an elite group of pedophiles abusing children.
They've been saying it for way longer than that.
But it was coming out more aggressively. And
Bohemian Grove and all
and
that
then it was no, that's all just a conspiracy theory because it got mixed in with the QAnon lizard people.
Also, when Alex Jones is reporting on it, it's not.
My point being is that now we know that
what you're saying,
large part of that's true. So I guess I'm just wondering, do you think any of that was true?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to figure out the incentives.
It makes me want to go back and be wait a second, was there a reason to panic? And were they exposed and then it was covevered up? You know what I mean? I'm a bit concerned there.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think that's sort of an unanswerable question in some ways, but
I agree. Yeah.
My suspicion is that the vast majority of it was manufactured.
By who and for what? But that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So
who did that?
Okay. So, I mean, again, I'll preface this, we'll never know, but if you look at extremism, right? If you look at how it works on multiple facets, if you're extreme and you need people to believe that Satan is out there, you need the enemy, the boogeyman, there's going to be people in whatever arenas that are going to manufacture this to scare you into being aligned with them. And I guess that would be people, this is where I don't really know who those people are.
I think it's a little bit like I was saying, there's a little thread of something going on. And then, I mean, what is a newspaper supposed to do? If there's an allegation that there's all this horrible child abuse going on, they're going to report it. I mean, of course, they'll say allegations of, but the word people hear is abuse. They don't hear the word allegation. And sometimes that's really a good thing. Sometimes this stuff is true. But even though what I was saying earlier about how none of those 12,000 cases could be confirmed or corroborated or anything, you wonder okay, well, maybe a small number were true, which is, its own horrific tragedy. But I think it's just a sort of social contagion. Like
Yeah.
we, you think about like the Salem witch trials. It's like, this is this sort of terrifying thing about human beings and our machinery is that we just like can get pulled into things.
6'7". How did that become?
Exactly. Yeah. And some of it's kind of fun and silly, but some of it's not fun and silly. But the Satanic Panic, I really would say like there was a big article about the Satanic Panic in Harper's a couple years ago that I don't really remember much about, but maybe your readers would enjoy reading that. The book, there's maybe a page about the Satanic Panic in my book, so I certainly don't pretend to be an expert here. But, it's in my book because it's another example of how what was happening in the culture was kind of represented by what was happening in this group, that like they were doing some abusive things. Like they were being kind of culty. I mean, they were a cult, but the irony, of course, is that the cult used the Satanic Panic to say like, well, that's why you need to join our group because there's all this horrible stuff happening in the world. It is dangerous out there. Don't let your kids go to these schools. You don't know what's happening on the corner from you. You have to come to us. This is what's safe. Yeah, it's really sad.
And then they were abusing them.
Exactly. It's the whole like projection thing where it's like you accuse someone of doing precisely the thing that you're guilty of, which, we see a lot of.
Yeah, see a lot of. Let's take a break from the cultiverse. Here's a word from our sponsors. If I signed up for Mint Mobile right now, I'd be dodging those wild wireless bills, the sneaky fees, and those so-called free perks that somehow cost you more in the long run. At some point, you have to ask, why are we still doing this to ourselves? Mint Mobile exists to fix exactly that. No drama, no nonsense, just premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. You still get high-speed data and unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network, just without the financial betrayal. And the switch is weirdly easy. Bring your phone, keep your number, activate with eSIM in minutes, and boom, you're saving money. No long-term contracts, no hoops to jump through. So yeah, maybe it's time to break up with your overpriced wireless situation. Next time my contract's up, this is exactly what I'm using. Get 3 months of premium service for $15 a month with Mint Mobile and keep a little more cash in your pocket where it belongs. If you like your money, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/Colty. That's mintmobile.com/Colty. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, 5 gigabyte plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Thanks for listening, everyone. Now let's dive back into the cultiverse.
And one thing we didn't talk about in relation to what the group believed, one of my notes here is, this is like a half note, so maybe you're going to have to elaborate on it, but the psychosexual, what'd you call it?
Yeah, I don't know what I call it, psychosexual something. There was a lot of psychosexual something going on in this group. So the sex stuff is exhibit A of this projection thing, because the group was just completely obsessed with sex in a negative way. I mean, it was like sex was the sort of primary sin or expression of satanic energy in the world. And so much of what they preached was about like suppressing desire, and that like all various forms of sexual behavior were going to lead to someone going to hell. And that, but part of that, to me, to my mind, part of my read of what was going on there was that, Lila Deborah had been hippies, and that had been a pretty sexually free era. I'm not going to speak for Lila Deborah because I never found a place where she talked about her own sexual history, but Jim talked about his sexual history, which was substantial. He said he, quote, fornicated every woman he could jump on. So there was like a real sense of sexual, I think ultimately guilt. There was a lot of guilt about that. And it was an ongoing thing. Like Jim, at least I know, again, this is my guess, is that I think that these desires remained active within them, and that they really felt like they had to fight them, and that the group's obsession with sex was a way of them being able to fight it. And yet this obsession with sex in a condemnatory kind of way was its own positive obsession. Like by focusing so much on how bad it was, it became kind of weirdly erotic. So like Deborah would get down on the floor and wail and thrust and gyrate and take the pins out of her hair and just like whip her head. And it was like extremely sexual. She's doing it in this way to be like, I'm exercising the spirit of XYZ, perhaps lust or something or whatever. but the expression of it is just like, oh wow, you look like you're in like a strip club, like that's what's so interesting to me, is that like you become the thing you're trying to fight. And that's true of so many things in the world.
It controls you. Yeah.
So the psychosexual whatever is a huge animating force for this group.
Well, that's the whole thing about, you see a lot of these kind of defiant personalities, teenager personalities that really they're dependent personalities because they're dependent on the thing that they're defying to define what they're not.
Right.
And
that's
so
totally the case here. Absolutely.
It becomes kind of this, well, now I'm really dependent, but I feel independent. So once the feeling of independence, the dopamine rush of the feeling wears off, what are you left with? You're left with this personality that is really a product of the thing you thought you were individuating from. So that's my TED Talk.
It's a good TED Talk.
Thank you.
How's Sarah? Maybe we'll get to talk to her, but tell us quickly, is she doing okay?
Yeah, she's doing okay.
Did she like the book?
There's some of it I won't get into because I would want to let her speak for herself with it. But, she's doing in her life, generally, she's doing very well. Yeah. Which, it's a real life, which is to say it's a life that includes difficulty and, pain. And, she had these extraordinarily traumatic experiences while in this group. And those remained with her in some ways. But she has managed to build a version of the life she wanted to build. And there's something extraordinarily inspiring about it to me, even as it came at tremendous cost. Like, I don't want to pretend that there wasn't an extraordinary cost, because there was. And I won't say what those costs were, but they're substantial in there in the book. But in the midst of that, she has created something really beautiful. And, she, from the beginning, she said she wanted to talk to me because she wanted her story to be useful to other people. Like, she wanted people who read the book to feel like, who are someone who's maybe stuck in a situation similar to hers, to feel like, okay, this is an inspiring example of how someone might build a life after this. And, my charge as like a journalist isn't necessarily to be like prescriptive to people, but I want to give like a platform. I wanted to give Sarah the opportunity to say that. But she, she runs marathons. She has a great laugh. She loves to grow plants. She's a great cook. She makes really good granola. And like, we've developed this fascinating relationship that is just really singular to me, because like, it's totally different from like the regular relationships I have with friends and family and so forth, because it is a repertorial relationship. It's a kind of, what would the word be? Like, there's a tremendous asymmetry, because like I know so much about her, because we spent like 5 years, like me going over to her apartment every Thursday and being like, okay, what happened next? And, she knows a lot about me, but we haven't spent 5 years of her coming to my place and her asking me those questions. And yet at the same time, there's a really profound intimacy that I find really moving. As part of what I like about this work is that you enter into these relationships in a way that's just doesn't happen in real life, or not real life, outside of a reporting relationship. And there's a sort of, you're cutting to the bone really quickly in these interviews. And there's something about that I really like, because the framework of a journalistic interview is to dispense of the sort of fluff. Well, it's not fluff necessarily. Like, our relationships involve intense things and non-intense things, but like,
we skip formalities.
Yeah, you skip formalities, and that's kind of fun. I mean, I don't want that out of every relationship in my life. I want to talk about like the Oscars with my friends too.
Yeah.
Shampoo friends, I call them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, what a good phrase. That's great. Yeah.
I hope that we can meet. Even if we can't talk to her, there's like a bunch of books I want to share with her of other people who I feel like went through a very similar thing. One in particular is Danny Wrench, who wrote a book called Dark Squares about chess. And his leaders reminded me so much of Jim and Deborah. I just feel like there's a little community forming of ex-cult members who lived through very similar things that I feel like they need to know each other.
Yeah. Harrison, you touch on something like, I wouldn't say it was necessarily an adjustment period for me, and I don't know if you experienced this, Sarah, but one of the things that I look back on, and I wouldn't say I don't like, but there's elements that I don't like, is that we were put in a position of authority with people because we were asking questions and eliciting information, and to your point, cutting to the bone with people that we had just met rather quickly in about a 5-day period. And oftentimes, people that I would rather have a peer relationship with saw me as someone that could help them. And I had skipped certain formalities with them, but them not with me. And where some people felt like, oh, I have this power. I felt like I had relationships with people, but I didn't necessarily like the power dynamic because the relationships weren't equitable in the same sense. I wasn't trading, they weren't trading. It wasn't like, and so after a while, I felt like a lot of my relationships that, let's say if you came and I wanted a friendship with you, you would see me more player coach. And I recognized my relationships were kind of lopsided in that way. And so when I kind of call it re-entry, I have the skill set and I can see and hear things kind of pretty immediately with the way I elicit, but I don't want the information now. Like people can disclose things to me that I don't want to know yet because I feel like it's skipping steps and I want it to be more of an equitable relationship, unless they just go, hey, Nip, I appreciate your view on this. And it's a clear exchange. And does that make sense? Like, so
it makes sense.
It's an interesting kind of, you put language to it just in a journalistic thing, but that was one of the things that I always recognize. And oftentimes my relationships kind of struggle in that regard because I don't hold back when I see stuff, disproportionate.
I can speak to that.
To what authority I have and I haven't earned. And a lot of the authority that I earned was because I was a coach in this organization and not because I met you out somewhere, we shared ideas. And so it's been a reconciliation, of that, if that puts language to it.
What that makes me think of actually is that in these groups, the kind of immediate cutting to the bone is actually a really important way of how people are drawn in, because you've shared this like profound intimacy of like revealing really deep things about yourselves, things maybe you feel really bad about. And then you have this kind of anxious loyalty to the person that you told this to. It's like they hold this little precious thing and it's not just that you're sort of like afraid they're going to tell other people. It's just a bond. If there is like a shared intimacy, which leads
I think it's both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, both. For sure.
It's like an unplanned blackmail. Like when you give people all your secrets, you're like, the person might not even say, if you leave, I'm going to release them. You just know that's a possibility. It might be more overt or covert, right?
And that's the nature of vulnerability, or what you might want to call love. It's like, I take a leap in meeting, say Sarah, and she's done enough to me to inspire me to share my vulnerability with her. And I'm trusting her with that.
Right.
In the same context, is she going to do the same? Is she seeing enough safety in me to do the same? And then that becomes the foundation of what you might call a loving relationship or whatever. A lot of those boundaries are crossed. There's not clear language to when it was crossed. You can feel it maybe, but you don't want to push back. You don't want to be distrustful or whatever. And so you're kind of coerced into this thing, and you're at the whim of a lot of other people's trust that you don't really know well, but you're hoping that your vulnerability created it. If it's not reciprocal, then it's just a lot of things that I had to step back and go, okay, how do I want to do this? And sometimes I'll err on the side of just being closed off because I need to. I got to figure out that boundary or whatever. And then do I disclose what I'm seeing? Do I disclose what I'm seeing? Is it appropriate? Do they need to know it? And
I don't know how we got on this tangent, but I like it.
It was more of like how he was with the subject and Sarah. And so he said something to me that it was a lot of the reconciliation of how I move forward in my life, with the kind of skill set of knowing how to elicit from people and not needing to know it.
Yeah. But, for the journalist, it's sort of like, do you want to know it?
Yeah.
But you also need to be careful. If someone says something where you're like, I know they're telling me this now, but I know they don't want this out.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you need to carry that carefully, even if they don't say they don't want it out.
Well, we'd love to have that opportunity with her if she's open to it. Or Moira, or is Moira still alive? Moira still alive?
Oh, yeah. Moira's great. Yeah.
Either or both.
I mean, I'm sure Sarah would love to speak with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And regardless.
Let her hear this episode.
Yeah,
she
see
can
if she trusts us. Yeah. And then I'd love to send her and also.
In the spirit of what we just spoke about.
A copy of we used to send my memoir, but now that this is going to be out by the time this episode airs, we'll send you the new book. So thank you for your well-timed research and consistency with your journalism. It's a really good book. Anyway, Harrison, thank you. I hope your book just is so well, and please keep in touch with us. Okay, everybody, that was the end of part 2. Don't forget his book publishes this week. Please do check it out wherever books are sold, and you might want to for all the details. There was a lot to cover, and as you could probably tell, we couldn't cover it all, and it is quite a read.
I really like how he answered our questions. He maintained some objectivity, don't you think?
Absolutely. He was a great interview.
He was careful in how he answered the questions, which I appreciate.
His whole book is just really thoughtful and informative and well-researched.
Respectful. Yeah.
Let us know what you think. Don't forget to buy our book too.
There you go again.
Write a review if you already did. Blah, 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 blah. See you next week on
Kids Beat.
A Little Bit Culty.
Do you remember that show, Kids Beat?
I don't think I do. I remember Mini Pops.
Yeah. See you again next week on Kids Beat.
Never watched it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay. I was in Canada.
All right.
Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.